Thank you for joining us for our first on-air hangout. This is very exciting to get to share this information with you live. So let me talk a little bit about the purpose of this session before we get started. We would like to share some information with you about the English Open Source program, our volunteer initiatives specifically, and we're going to walk you through our application process. We're going to take about 30 minutes for our presentation total. The first 20 minutes will be dedicated to the presentation and information sharing. And then at the end of our presentation, we'll provide you an opportunity to ask us any questions that you may have. Please know that throughout the presentation, if you have questions, you can submit them at any time. If you look at the left side of your Google Hangouts screen, you'll see a yellow tab. If you click on that tab, it will show a window on the right-hand side of your screen called Showcase. And in the showcase, we've provided you with clickable links. So throughout our presentation, we will refer you to these links where you can find the various resources that we're referring to. If you would like to submit questions, there is a Q&A tab. It's a little tab that says Q&A on it. If you click on that, then a question box will also show up on the right-hand side, and you can submit your questions as you're thinking of them. And then at the end of the session, we are committed to answering all questions that were given. However, we're going to try to stay to the 10-minute Q&A time to respect everybody's time this evening. And so with that being said, if we are unable to answer your questions in that allotted time, please feel free to email us at the email address we will provide you at the end of the session with your questions so that we can give you a thoughtful, detailed response. If you are having issues with this Google Hangout, or if you need some extra assistance or technical support, we do have a staff member who is available right now to assist you, and she has Google Chat open. And as you can see at the bottom of the screen, this is the chat that we're using if you have Gmail. If you don't have Gmail, we also have our Skype open. Please don't call us on Skype, but you can send us a chat message, and that way we can assist you that way as well. So let's get started. My name is Stephanie Haregrove, and I work for the National Volunteer Center. The purpose of the National Volunteer Center is to provide assistance and support to the volunteers we have working for the English Open Source program. I was a volunteer for a year and a half in 2013, and I'm originally from South Dakota in the United States. My co-presenter, good friend and colleague, Sandra Pina, is also joining us this evening, who's also a part of the National Volunteer Center. Sandra is from Boston, Massachusetts in the United States, and she volunteered for a full academic year in 2010. And then on our technical support, we have Madeline Quick, also a part of our NVC staff. And Maddie is from New Hampshire in the United States, and she also volunteered for an academic year in 2013.
Okay, so who are we? What is the English Opens Doors program? As some of you may already know, we're an entity of the Ministry of Education. We're also supported by the UNDP here in Chile, and we're working to promote and strengthen English language learning in public schools throughout Chile, and we do that through a number of free initiatives that are listed here on the slide. As a government program, our focus is to provide opportunities and support to underserved municipal schools or publicly funded schools, rather than those schools that are receiving private funding and have better access to resources. Here in Chile, municipal schools make up about 1/3 of the school system. And the students who attend these schools tend to be the most socially vulnerable and socioeconomically disadvantaged. So this is really your opportunity as a volunteer to make an impact where it's needed most. You'll be strengthening public education here in Chile. You'll be increasing the access to quality English instruction as well of your students. And you'll really be impacting them and changing their attitudes towards learning English and also towards learning in general.
Okay. So here in the English Open Source program, we're fully aware that there are many different programs and opportunities out there which provide teaching and volunteering experiences that you could potentially enroll in. So we want to talk to you specifically about how the English Open Source program might be a great fit for what you're looking for and what you would like to get out of your volunteer experience. First of all, our opportunity is an opportunity to engage in a meaningful, fee-free Chilean government and United Nations-backed program, and the intention is really focused on meeting the needs of the community, as opposed to the other programs out there, which are more volunteerism-based, and they're more about making the profit off of your opportunity, off of your volunteership. And that's not what we're doing. This is a real experience. It is not tourism-related business venture. We are providing this opportunity for volunteers to teach and volunteer with this government program in a stable South American country with a very warm culture. And while our program does exist to benefit the Chilean school system, most of our volunteers also walk away from this experience feeling extremely rewarded and enlightened. Our volunteers are also our beneficiaries. And so something else that we want to mention, which makes our program unique, is that we also offer placement preferences in all 15 regions of Chile, as opposed to many programs which place their volunteers specifically in Santiago. Our placements range from the driest deserts in the world, which would be in the north of Chile, to the beautiful Patagonia region. We have plenty of rivers and mountains, lakes, volcanoes, islands, and coastline in between. Chile is both culturally and naturally diverse and rich. We do want to note, however, while on your application, we would ask you what your placement preferences are, it's very important to keep in mind that our focus is meeting the needs of the school communities and the placement communities. We're really trying to make a good fit with the volunteer into the vulnerable school community that needs that resource and needs that heart. So with that being said, we do ask that our candidates are flexible in terms of their placement preferences. We also provide the option to live with a Chilean host family and experience Chile's authentic culture firsthand. And we'll talk about that a little later in this session. But first, we want to talk about impact. So how is the English Opens Doors program volunteer initiative impactful? And we want to share some information with you. So over 2,100 volunteers have benefited over 1,000 schools over the past 11 years. And in this year alone, we have benefited approximately 40,000 students and 170 school communities. These are numbers and statistics that we're very proud of because there are students and people behind these numbers. And so we want to share some of the results of a survey that we gave to our students, directors, and teachers in the schools that we benefit this past year in 2014. So we had 10,000 students who work with volunteers fill out their final survey and telling us what their experience was like in working with a volunteer and how we can improve our program, because we are looking for the best ways to meet the needs of these student and school communities. So here we have a quote that was written in one of the surveys that we received. And I think it's important to highlight that most of the surveys for students are typically written in Spanish, but this one was written in English. So we left it as is, and we thought that it was a great depiction of how students felt about the volunteers and the experience they were having in the classroom with their volunteers. Okay. So we'll share some more survey results with you. So we're going to share some surveys from the student perspective and from the teacher's perspective. So we'll start with the student perspective. We asked students various questions. For example, did their volunteer motivate them to learn English? And as you can see, the results were incredibly positive. Over 90% of the students agree, yes, in fact, the volunteer did motivate them to learn English. We also asked about their enjoyment in English class and if that had increased after working with a volunteer. And again, we have very positive results from that survey. We also asked if they felt that they were able to improve their capacity to communicate in English while working with a volunteer. And again, there's some really great numbers there that we're proud of and are kind of helping us direct what we want to do and how we want to improve for 2016 school year. So now let's look at these from the teacher's perspective. We asked teachers various questions. For example, did they think the English-speaking volunteer motivated their students to learn English? And again, over 90% of the teachers agreed, yes, that was their experience, and that's how they felt about working with the native or near native volunteer English speaker. We also asked if they thought the majority of their students had noticeably improved their communicative English skills while working with a volunteer. And again, we have really great results from that particular survey.
Okay. So what are some of the benefits of volunteering with our program? Well, we are a fee-free program, so we're not in the business of making money, but rather we're making a considerable investment in each one of our volunteers. First off, as a volunteer, you won't have to pay a visa fee to come to Chile. The fee will be waived. So for those of you that are in the US, that'll save you approximately $450. And for the UK citizens, that will save you approximately £983. In addition, our staff provides excellent visa and pre-departure support. So we help you get through that process so that you can arrive to Chile in time for your service. As a volunteer, you're going to gain tremendous professional teaching experience internationally. And you're going to be engaging your students on a day-to-day basis in these really dynamic classes in your own teaching space, which is going to be very, invaluable in terms of creating this immersion experience for your students where you're teaching in 100% English. As an English Opens Doors program volunteer, you're also going to receive a stipend of 70,000 Chilean pesos per 30 days of service, which is approximately $100. And this is really meant to help you with costs associated with your volunteer responsibilities. So, for example, day-to-day transportation to your school. In addition, our program will provide you with transportation from Santiago to your placement location. And at the end of your service, we'll also provide you with that transportation back to Santiago. You'll also have the chance to live with a host family as part of our program. And this is a great opportunity for you to really engage with your local community, to learn about Chilean culture firsthand as well. We'll also provide you with in-country health insurance and a basic Chilean bank account while you're here. Throughout your service, you're going to be supported by a very passionate and dedicated staff, which is made up of former volunteers and professional Chilean educators. So that support team is going to be comprised of the National Volunteer Center staff. You're going to have a regional representative in your region as well, who will be your regional support. You're going to have a lot of support coming from your head teacher within your school and also coming from your host family. And so we're all working together to ensure that you have a really positive experience during your volunteer service. In addition, we have a week-long volunteer orientation in Santiago for all of our services. So this is definitely comprehensive training where we're going to review a lot of the topics that you're seeing on your screen right now. We're going to talk about lesson planning, and we're going to give you TEFL basics and a lot of strategies for managing your classroom as well. And as a volunteer, you'll also have a regional orientation in your placement region, where you'll be meeting with your regional representative and also with your head teacher as well. If you want more information about the orientation sessions, definitely check the clickable link on the right of your screen in your showcase, and head to our website for more information to take a look at 2015 sessions. In addition, we also provide other avenues of support. So we have a Facebook forum for active volunteers, and that's really a peer support network. So you can talk to fellow volunteers, and also we have a few alumni in the mix as well, so you can network, you can share lesson plan ideas, and kind of talk about what's working and what's not working in your classroom. We also have an online resource drive. There are lots of awesome activities and games that you can implement into your classes. And also we have a lesson plan library with lots of lesson plans used and created by former volunteers that you can go ahead and adapt for your particular classes. And lastly, we also do one classroom observation per semester per volunteer. And this is really meant to one member of the National Volunteer Center or your regional representative will actually attend one of your classes and will give you feedback on what's working and things you can improve on, so you can become a more effective teacher in the classroom as well.
So we spoke with you about the program and we talked about volunteer benefits. We mentioned the various supports that we have in place, but you might be asking yourself, well, this sounds great. This sounds like a program that I could commit to and it seems quite organized, But what exactly does a volunteer do with the English Opens Doors program? So we'd like to take a few minutes to talk about that and give you some specific information. So as you can see by looking at your screen, we do expect that our volunteers are working 35 hours a week. And those 35 hours are divvied up into two larger objectives. So the first 24 hours are pedagogical hours. This is the time that you would be spending physically in your classes. You're creating classes that are dynamic and engaging, really getting the students to participate, and you're focusing on enhancing their listening and speaking skills. The idea is that you are working with your head teacher to make a connection between what they are teaching in their class and what you are working on in your class, so that there is a clear link for the students between the two classes. And this is happening in 100% English. So we ask our volunteers to create an English immersion experience for their students for the amount of time that they have them in class. The 11 other hours are dictated or dedicated to other tasks that we would ask you to accomplish to be an effective volunteer. For example, time to do your individual lesson planning, as well as lesson planning with your co-teachers, so that you and your head teacher can ensure that there is a link. There is a recognizable link for the students between your two classes. We also ask our volunteers to create extracurricular activities to implement within their school community for their students to really get involved, engaged, and motivated. So when we talk about what volunteers do, we're going to talk about it in two contexts. We're going to talk about how volunteers benefit the students, and we're going to talk about how our volunteers benefit the teachers. So let's start with the students. As I had said, our volunteers are working to really improve student speaking and listening skills by motivating them to really take an interest in learning English through the various activities that they would design and facilitate. Also, it's important to note that the way that it's structured is that you and your head teacher will work together. You'll split a class into half. So if there are 40 students in one class group, you and your teacher are going to split that class into half, and your teacher is going to work on the technical side of the language with these students. They're going to focus on the grammatical structures. They're going to focus on the reading and writing skills, while in your classroom, you're going to be really focusing, as I had said, complementing what they're doing, but focusing on speaking and listening. And then at the halfway mark in terms of timing for that class period, you and the head teacher would switch the groups you're working with. So at the end of a full class period, the students have had time both with the head teacher as well as with you. And then with you being a foreigner in the classroom, inherently you'll have opportunities to share your culture with the students, thus broadening their worldview. We also ask that our volunteers participate in our English winter camps, and we'll talk more specifically about that a little later in this presentation, and that you help us facilitate and implement various initiatives designed by the English Opens Doors program. And then lastly, as I had said earlier, we'll also ask you to implement and lead extracurricular activities within your school community. So now let's talk specifically about the teachers. You would be working in a municipal school with students ages 10 to 18, so 5th grade to 12th grade. And as I had said, you and your teacher would coordinate in that you would both be working with a half of a class group at a time. So not only does this structure benefit you in your classroom, because you would be working with 20 students as opposed to 40, which will really help you create truly engaging classes. It would be more difficult for you to do that with a class of 40, but it also benefits the head teacher because they're also then working with a smaller student to teacher ratio, and they can give more individualized time to the students that they're working with. And then our volunteers also benefit our Chilean English teachers in giving them an opportunity to practice with native or near native English speakers. And we ask our volunteers to participate in the local English teacher networks. These teacher networks are created in the various communities here, like throughout all of our regions of Chile, and they're comprised of Chilean English teachers in that community. The purpose is for professional development, support, idea sharing, and for creating all English activities for their respective schools. So you might be asking, and many candidates do ask us, what makes a good volunteer in terms of the fit for this particular program. What are you looking for in your application process? What are you looking for when you're conducting your interviews? So we want to share some of these insights with you and be transparent about what type of volunteer tends to be more successful in our program. So some of our requirements are that we are seeking native or near native English speakers who have obtained a bachelor's degree from an accredited university, and we do have an age range that we're looking for. We look for candidates between the ages of 21 and 35 years old. However, we do want to note that in the past we have made exceptions for candidates who are over the age of 35. So if you are interested in this particular initiative and you're over the age of 35, we still invite you and encourage you to apply, as we do make exceptions on a case-by-case basis. We also require that our volunteers are mentally and physically capable of teaching children. And then some other points that we want to highlight for you is that many of our successful volunteers, when they join our program, they're joining because they are highly committed and they have a focus on the teaching aspect of this experience. What we're looking for are volunteers and candidates who have a similar motive to what we have in placing the time, the heart, and the attention toward those schools that really need that support and really need that dedication. We've also found that our most successful volunteers balance the ability of being flexible and adaptable with also simultaneously being able to be autonomous and really take initiative. So identifying what the need is in the school community and figuring out how you can fill that void. And then for us too, we also look for those that have a positive attitude and a willingness to be open to this experience. A positive attitude really goes a long way. And it's important for us to note that teaching experience is not a requirement for our program. While we have had many successful volunteers who are professional teachers in their home countries or have TEFL certifications, we've also had many successful volunteers who they're not professional teachers, they haven't had professional teacher training, but what they do have is they have an openness and a desire to learn all they can in our orientation week. They basically come in like a sponge and they soak up all of the information and then they synthesize that. And when they get into their school communities, they execute those different techniques and strategies. And they have excellent communication skills in that they reach out when they need support and advice. They talk to their regional support person and they work with their head teacher to determine how they really can meet the needs of the students that they're working with.
Excellent. So one of the unique aspects of our program is the opportunity to live and have a host family experience. So for those of you who opt to live with the host family, you'll receive your own individual room, and you also have 3 meals a day with your host family. So this is a tremendous opportunity for you, as a volunteer speaking 100% English most of the day, to go home and really, grow and strengthen your Spanish speaking abilities as well. It's a great opportunity over your meals to really connect with your family, to really experience Chilean culture. We definitely encourage our volunteers to spend as much time with their family as possible. And watch a novella with your family every night, go to Zumba classes with your family and really experience, culture within your community. Our families, there obviously are going to be challenges. If you were living with your own family during, 3 or 4 months, you would experience similar challenges, but you're integrating into a family that's already functioning. They already have their norms, the way they do things, and you definitely have to be flexible and willing to adjust to those norms. And in some cases, it's going to mean you're going to lose a bit of your autonomy because you'll have to be touching base with your family, maybe letting them know when you're going to be late for dinner, when you're staying out late on the weekends, and things like that. It's also, the majority of our volunteers actually opt to live with the host family, but there are some volunteers who opt to live independently as well. So that is another option. And for those of you considering independent living, you would receive a stipend of 235,000 Chilean pesos per 30 days. And so this is equivalent to about $340 US, and it actually combines your volunteer allowance of 70,000 Chilean pesos with the host family stipend of 165,000 Chilean pesos. So you would receive this monthly, and it would help subsidize both your teaching related costs and your living costs. It's important to note that for independent volunteers, it's their sole responsibility for finding housing within their placement location. You can definitely turn perhaps to your regional representative in terms of suggestions of where to begin your search, but ultimately it's up to you. It's definitely a great option for volunteers who are seeking a bit more autonomy and a more adult-friendly lifestyle while they're volunteering. It's actually the only option for couples who want to live together during their service, and also for friends who are volunteering together and want to physically live together. Some points to consider is that living independently can end up being a bit more expensive depending on where you're placed within Chile and what the housing options are available are within your placement location. And as an independent volunteer, you will have to assume additional costs such as utilities and maybe security deposits and your rent, and of course your meals as well. So both of these living options are great and have their benefits and challenges, and we definitely encourage you to weigh them when deciding which option suits you best.
Okay. So we've given you information about our program and the volunteer initiative. Now we want to talk to you about the steps that you would need to take if you were interested in our program to start your own volunteer experience with the English Opens Doors program. And that starts with the application process. So as you can see, we offer 4 services for 2016. We have 2 semester-long services and we have 2 year-long volunteer services. And I want to talk about some of the details in each of those services. So for our semester term services, we do not have vacation time available for those services because they're so short that we're trying to maximize the impact, and it would be very difficult to do if we shortened the volunteer service to less than a semester, which it already is. Okay, and what we ask is that our first 3 volunteer services, the ones that start in the fall season for us, which would be volunteer services 1, 2, and 3, we would ask you, and you would have the opportunity and privilege to participate in our English immersion winter camps. The amazing thing about the winter camp experience is that it really tends to students who are highly motivated and wanting to practice their English, want to get engaged, and want to have this fun camp experience really gravitate toward this camp experience. And many of our volunteers walk away from their volunteer experience saying that the camp part of their experience was one of the most memorable pieces. What we ask is that our VS1 service, because it is a semester-long service, they would work 2 weeks of camp, and then our year-long services would work 1 week of camp. We also want to talk about the 2 year-long services in terms of vacation. So for a year-long volunteer, we do provide 2 weeks of vacation time. One of those weeks will be given to you during the winter break of your school's winter break. And then the other vacation week, you can choose when it best meets your needs. For example, some of our volunteers, something might come up in their home country. For example, someone's getting married and they're having a wedding. So our year-long volunteers can use their week to attend the wedding or whatever their other commitment is, or if they would like to travel. And then also in terms of application decisions, it's also important to note that our VS1, 2, and 3 services, after the application process, we would get back to you with a decision within 2 weeks. But because our volunteer for service doesn't start until August and the application deadline is in April, we would let those candidates know about their status in our applicant pool at the end of this 2015 year or the beginning of 2016. So let's talk specifically about the process. It starts with an online application. And again, if you look at the showcase feature, you can see a link to our website, and that is where you'd be able to find the application. Once you fill out that online application, you would receive an email with the second part to this application process, which we would ask you for various required documents, as well as your availability for a Skype interview. And our interviews last anywhere between 45 minutes and an hour long. Okay, so if you're interested in this program and you would like to find out more, we are connected to various social outlets and we have some resources available for you. And so as you can see, and these are again also clickable links in the showcase on the right-hand side of your screen. This is our website. We also have a mailing list if you would like to sign up. We send regular monthly, more or less monthly updates, letting you know about the application process, letting you know about changes and updates in the volunteer services, as well as just keeping you informed about the various initiatives, both within the volunteer initiative, as well as the English Open Doors program as a whole, so that our volunteers can feel like they're a part of the English Open Doors community. We also have our email available. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And another excellent resource that we have that I want to tell you about briefly is our Ambassador Initiative. So our ambassadors are former volunteers who reach out to prospective candidates or prospective volunteers. And they're available to answer your questions and to share their perspective and to share their experience. What we have candidates tell us many times is, you know, what you're telling me sounds great. It sounds very eloquent. It sounds like something I would want to be a part of, but you also work for the English Open Doors program. Is there someone that I can talk to who's also a former volunteer who isn't currently working for the program? And so that's why we created the Ambassador Initiative, so that you would have that outlet and you would have someone else to ask questions to hear from a different perspective and hear a different experience. And then we also will have one more informational session, which will be more in depth about the volunteer experience specifically. And we're calling it a Day in the Life information session. And we'll hold this on Wednesday, November 11th at 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. So if this is something that you would be interested in, again, we have a clickable link in our showcase feature. Please feel free to click on that and register. And please know that you're clicking on this link and registering does not necessarily commit you to the event. What you're telling us is you would like more information about the event as it becomes available.
Okay, excellent. So that's going to conclude our presentation for today. We hope that you found it useful and informative, and that you also join us for our next Hangout session in November. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the questions that have been submitted during our presentation. And if you haven't already, go ahead and submit your questions. And we're going to take 10 minutes to answer them. For those of you who we cannot answer your questions within this time limit, please email us at the address listed on your screen, and we will reply to your email and give you a thoughtful response within the next few days. Okay? So our first question is, how many people normally participate in an orientation? Well, that is going to depend on the particular volunteer service, but typically it will be around 50 to 60 volunteers participating in each orientation. Thank you for that question. Okay, our next question is, how long does the visa process normally take? So when we typically recommend our volunteers apply for their visa 11 to 13 weeks before their volunteer service start date. So as I mentioned earlier, we definitely provide you a lot of support in terms of obtaining your visa. So we actually send you an email letting you know when that application window has opened, and when you should start collecting all of your documents, and when you should submit your visa application. Thanks for that great question. Our next question is, what types of activities can volunteers do in their extracurricular hours? That's a terrific question. It's actually, it's open, and the volunteers can kind of go in many directions. We definitely recommend that once you're in your school, that you sort of survey your students to see what they're interested in, maybe what some of their passions are, and kind of go from there in terms of deciding what the need is and what type of extracurricular you can provide to your students. Our next question, is there any flexibility with the start and end dates? Unfortunately, there is not. The volunteer services that we have published are the only services that we will have this year. And the reason really is because the orientation at the start of your service is so incredibly important in terms of preparing you for the classroom experience. And we're going to be sharing such vital information that it's imperative that all volunteers start at the same time. So we're making sure that we're setting up everyone for success in the classroom.
Okay. We've also, just to kind of give you some perspective on other questions that we're frequently asked, we are asked sometimes if we provide scholarships or if we supplement volunteers' international travel. And the answer to that is because we are a government-funded program and we're using Chilean tax dollars to fund the initiative that we're implementing, we're unable to pay for those expenses, for example, international flights. But what we can provide is we on our website, if you look under the current volunteers link, we do have a document or a supplemental guide that will give you information on crowdfunding.
Okay, our next question. Is there any level of Spanish required to participate? No, we have volunteers who come and participate in our program with absolutely no Spanish. And they pick it up as they go from their host families within the community. And sometimes it's best for students when volunteers speak very little Spanish because they're really forced to use 100% English in the classroom and really create that immersive English environment for their students. If you speak Spanish, it's definitely going to be a benefit to you during your experience here in Chile, but we definitely ask that you refrain from using Spanish in the classroom with your students.
Okay. So what we'll do, because we have no more questions on the docket, we'll give 1 more minute for question submissions. And then if we have no other questions, then we'll close out the session. And we also want to recognize that there is a time delay. And so if we end up closing the session before you submit your question, again, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on the email address we have provided you with supplemental questions. Or again, if you're interested in talking to a former volunteer, please let us know that as well. And we would be more than happy to connect you with a former volunteer tomorrow when we get back into the office. And yeah, with that being said, we genuinely appreciate the time that you've taken to join our information session. We hope to see your application soon. And if there's anything else that we can clarify or provide for you, please, please, please don't hesitate to let us know. Okay, thank you so much. Have a great day.